Okay, Unit 10, Lecture 2D. We get to the end of the Civil Rights Movement, hopefully, in this lecture. So the 1963 March on Washington helped influence public opinion in support of major civil rights legislation. The nonviolence of the protesters draws a lot of attention and a lot of positive attention from the nation at large. It also demonstrates the power of this nonviolence and mass protest, okay? So the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963 elevates Lyndon B. Johnson to the presidency. Okay, President Johnson plays an important role in the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act by asking Congress to pass this bill in memory of President Kennedy and by pressuring individual congressmen to get behind it, okay? So the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was on your whiteboard, is a really important piece of legislation. It prohibits discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, and gender, okay? No longer could employers discriminate against job applicants based on race, okay? Second, it desegregated public accommodations such as hotels, motels, and restaurants. And third, it gave the federal government more power to enforce all the laws governing civil rights. So since the 1964 law failed to increase voter registration among African Americans, President Johnson again gets behind new legislation, and he proposes a separate voting rights bill. So President Johnson again plays an important role in the passage of major civil rights legislation. The 1965 Voting Rights Act, also on your whiteboard, outlawed literacy tests as a requirement for voter registration. Okay, no longer could southern states deny the right to vote to African Americans who could not read and write. Second, the Voting Rights Act sent federal registrars, federal officers down to register African Americans in the South to vote. This act results in a large increase in the number of African American voters throughout the South. Okay, in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated, all right, and in Dr. King's memory, President Johnson again persuades Congress to pass some more civil rights legislation. And the third major civil rights law that's passed is the Civil Rights Act of 1968. This prohibits racial discrimination in the sale or rental of housing. With Dr. King's death and the passage of federal open housing legislation in the United States, we enter a new era in history. Okay, so although racial discrimination continues today in American society, neither state nor federal law supports it, so it's not legally backed up anywhere. Okay, and during the 60s, then we move a little closer to realizing the Declaration of Independence's promise that all men are created equal. Another important piece that you should know is the 24th Amendment, which outlaws poll taxes. Okay, so some other civil rights vocabulary you should be aware of. I want to throw that in. 24th Amendment, no more poll taxes. Marcus Garvey, a guy you should know, he's behind black nationalism and the Back to Africa movement. He's going to say we can't live together as races and the African Americans should return to Africa. Okay, the Black Panthers are a militant organization that believes they reject nonviolence and advocate self-defense for African Americans against police abuse. We'll see the FBI actually infiltrates the Black Panthers, and they're going to be led by a guy named Stokke Carmichael. Okay, Stokke Carmichael is the leader of the Black Panthers. Malcolm X is a leader in the Nation of Islam who initially is completely against the races living together, but after his conversion to Islam, he's going to change. After a trip to Mecca and his conversion to Islam, he changed. Though he's going to question some of the activities of the Nation of Islam's leader, and he's going to end up being assassinated or killed by fellow black American Muslims, okay, as in a power struggle in the movement, okay? And that should end civil rights for Unit 10. We'll expand more on it in class.